Folks, you're watching Cracking the CEO Code with Nikki Moore. It's a pleasure. I'm Dr. Christian Gregory, and anytime I can sit with family and share with you all, it's a true blessing. Thank you.
After reluctantly agreeing to head up a failing startup in its fourth year of operations, creating infrastructure, writing policies, building a powerhouse team, making the company more than profitable in just 2 short years, I was told by my would-be partners that I didn't have what it takes to be a CEO. But just like Steve Jobs when he was fired from Apple, I didn't let that stop me. Instead, I set out on a mission to discover exactly what it takes to be a great CEO. Join me as I embark on this adventure. I'm tapping into the experiences and life stories of 100 CEOs. Find out how they think, what they eat, when they sleep, everything that goes into the magic of making a CEO. That's right, I'm cracking the CEO code. In this series, we'll discover exactly what it takes to go from good to great. Dr. Christian Claxton Gregory.
I love it.
I am so honored. I am so honored to finally be able to sit down and chat with you.
This is a privilege. I'm
Thank
excited
you.
to
And I'm
to
so
dig
honored.
in. Let's go.
Son of the struggle, whole family of the struggle. Your dad was the father of the struggle,
Absolutely.
and he pulled everybody in.
It was a lifestyle.
It was a lifestyle. It was a way of life.
And we knew nothing other than. So a lot of times people say,
Yeah.
well, how did you respond? How did you adjust to it? We knew nothing other than that was life. And so it wasn't, and you didn't have an option. And I don't say that in a bad way. I say, when we're young and we're being, we're apt pupils, we need leadership, and we don't need folks to tell us things and they're doing the opposite. We need folks to show us by example. And that was what was so wonderful about the Gregory family. You meet any of the 10 Gregory children, and all of us have that same, not just genetic DNA, but spiritual DNA and mental DNA. Loving and lovable is a cornerstone. And it doesn't always apply, beautifully to business, because business sometimes has a different value system than how we were raised. And so, having the opportunity as a businessman to come and sit with you and talk about industry and talk about balancing it with love and black glamour, it's a wonderful opportunity for me. So I was excited when you called. My dad thought the world of you, as you already know.
You are making this so easy for me. Like, he was the epitome of humility, and I find that in each of you who I've had the opportunity to have any kind of conversation with. And that leads me to, I guess, my first question. You have a very successful medical practice as a chiropractor, but you stepped away from that for a minute to manage your dad and his career. You became his business partner, and that's commendable. What is that like?
It was weird. Our relationship was kind of multi-personality. So I had a relationship with Dad. I had a relationship with Richard Gregory, the businessman. Then I had a relationship with Dick Gregory, the entertainer. And I could wear all of those hats, as could he. So there's many other folks, Miss Cicely Tyson, so many others that I called myself the chiropractor for the movement. So from Stevie Wonder, Rosa Parks, Coretta Scott King, you name them, they were patients of mine. We traveled around the world together. It was just such a charmed life to be able to help these icons, these pillars of the movement. I frequently say no country for old legends. Aging is aging, sore back, sore feet. And when folks are in pain, they really open up. So I had an opportunity to have conversations with these folks, not just as Dick Gregory's son, but as their caregiver. And it was a matter of fact, Cicely Tyson was my first patient, the first person I ever adjusted in my life as a chiropractor, other than my student clinic when I had other licensed chiropractors over my shoulder in school. The first person I ever adjusted as a chiropractor was Miss Cicely Tyson. And so my hands were shaking a bit. She thought it was some dynamic healing force. And so she said, oh, Gregory's right. My hands were shy. I said, oh my goodness, because she's strong but frail. I don't want to say strong but petite, very petite, larger than life. I mean, just a persona that just went on for days. And I knew there was a lot riding on that adjustment. So that just wasn't a
Wow.
simple adjustment for me. So having such a strong introduction into being a healthcare provider with extremely high profile patients, it really helped me to understand. And I frequently say, no country for old legends. These folks are human, just like you and I. They have
Yeah.
neck pain, back pain. And so Cicely Tyson would always say to me, once an adult, twice a child. And it was clear to me when my dad had entered his second childhood, and as a family, the Gregory family really came together, and we were determined that my father's second childhood was going to be profoundly better than his first. And so for me to, be his wingman and be shoulder to shoulder, it was a blessing. So I had 2 full-time jobs. I was practicing as a chiropractor, but I was managing my father out of my chiropractic practice, which was colorful because,
Wow, I imagine.
when he came in, it was, hey, it's, we're doing my stuff, and he always respected my practice.
Yeah.
But, I would have a mixed diversity of folks in my waiting room, and then Dick Gregory's back in my office dropping N-bombs louder that you could hear him out in the street. So it was an interesting dynamic, and there was so much laughter.
He was so regular.
Always. I mean, he had one gear. He had one gear, and it was full speed ahead. It was brutal honesty. Did not care if you liked it. Didn't want to hear about it. He was just going to keep giving.
And didn't matter who it was.
And a lot of people didn't realize that,
Didn't
because a
matter
lot
who
of
it
people would
was.
have one-on-ones and say,
Yep.
oh, he's just saying that because he's talking to me, not understanding
Anybody.
it doesn't matter what stage he
Yep.
was on, one person
Yep.
or 10,000 people, he was going to, give it
Same
straight
thing.
dope. And so
Same
to
thing.
be upfront and personal and in that orbit for so long, it was so much more than a father and son blessing.
Yeah.
It was a friendship, it was a partnership, and it was really dynamic. And it sustains me now. We lose folks that we love. If the life cycle does what it's supposed to do, we are supposed to lose our parents. Our parents are not supposed to lose
Correct.
children. And so that doesn't mean you're prepared for it, but you at least understand. And understanding is what really helped me navigate my father's transition.
He was very active all the way up to the end. And he had like 10 gigs
10 shows,
on the books.
absolutely.
Still,
The week he passed,
at the time of
he
his
had
death.
10
Yeah.
because as a comedian, you know this.
Yeah.
My dad and Paul, many times they'd have 3 shows
remember.
Friday, 3 shows Saturday, and he had 10 shows set up the week that he passed.
Wow.
And he had been doing shows right up to the end. He had decided he wanted to pivot back into comedy because he could be unfiltered.
So let me ask you this. As the CEO of the Gregory Estate,
Yes.
I just want to commend you again on how well you have preserved and carried forward the legacy to this point. And I think it's safe to say further.
Yes.
And how
absolutely.
much further you're going to take it. I'm very excited. Some of the stuff I know, but I know it's a lot that I don't. So what comes to mind when you hear the term CEO?
For me, CEO for so many folks, it's just, it's just letters, and they think, oh, it's important. I'm gonna see. The truth is that the buck stops with you.
Yeah.
We all have employees, we all have, executive teams, but your CFO can be wildly out of line. Doesn't matter. At the end of the day, the CEO is who gets held accountable. So my whole life, I've operated as a CEO.
Yes.
I've had businesses from a very I think I lied on the application. I had an American Express card, I think at the age of 16. My dad and mom had no earthly idea because I had businesses, I was establishing tax ID numbers. And so I understood as a business person, you don't use your own money to make money. And so my dad would wonder, and of course, anyone outside looking in, they were like, oh, of course, he's Dick Gregory's son. This is, this is Dick taking care of his children. My parents didn't believe in that. They believed you could see me with all of my friends, and you couldn't look and say, "Oh, this is Dick Gregory's son, and this is his friends." We all dressed alike. We all acted the same. So, for me, I understood early on more than IQ, EQ was instilled in us, and just being such an empathetic person really has been the guiding light for me as a CEO. On Tower Hill Farm, I was always Mr. Fix-It, no matter what. If
Really?
one of the older children had a flat tire, I wasn't even driving yet. They'd
were
come and wake me up
resourceful.
to change the tire. My dad would always say, if I come home and there's so much of one tool out of place, I know who did it, Christian, because he's the only one that does any work around here. I would skip school to drive the tractor and mow the lawn.
Really?
I mean, I
That was your
wasn't
thing.
interested in, academia at that point didn't interest me at all. I mean, it was school bored the life out of me. Anytime I could double back and stay and work, anytime there was a contractor at the house,
Mm-hmm.
I just was there. They knew they wouldn't even start working. They said, no, we know Christian wants to watch it. And what I would do and how I became the caretaker of Tower Hill Farm was watching the folks we paid to do stuff, then later coming back and doing it myself. When we first bought the farm, there was a caretaker who lived in a home, and contractually we had to keep him on the payroll. So here's this older white man that kind of came with the property. So I didn't understand he was being
That's
compensated.
perfect.
So in my mind, I said, "Oh, we got a white slave." I was young, so it was so I was like, well, things are full circle, role reversal. So the farm was interesting for so many reasons. And so Ivo Zanaboni is the gentleman's name. And I was
interesting
shoulder
name.
to shoulder with him all the time. I was like his little apprentice. So to this day, I could change my own oil, damn near take an engine apart. And just from being hands-on and wanting to understand how things work and how that applies to as a business person, you have to understand every aspect, every facet of your business from bottom to top. If you don't understand how the janitorial operation is working, how we're hiring and firing, next thing you know, you have a lot of egg on your face and you can't say, oh, that's not me. As CEO, everything is you. You are responsible for the entirety of the ship. And if the ship goes down like a captain, you go down with that ship.
That's
And
fact.
so that has always been what's guided me. It continues to guide me. Kevin Durant and Nike had reached out to my dad to do a Nike ad. Some of the family thought, great idea. Some of the family said, hey, we'd rather Dad not do that because it went against what some of their value system was. And my position was, I never told my dad, unless he said, hey, what do you think I should do? I would say, do whatever your heart. You've navigated the globe so beautifully, being led by your love for humanity and fairness. I'm not going to tell you this is a good idea or a bad idea. I see the pros and cons on both sides of it. And ultimately, he made that decision. And that's how I felt about my dad always. When we would, every contract, every agreement, we would sit, we had our usual spot. We'd grab a fermented beverage or two. We'd discuss it. We'd look at it, how it impacts now, how it impacts down the road. And with the Kevin Durant commercial, we saw it as an opportunity to reach down and get younger generations who may not know or did not know who Dick Gregory was as a catalyst for them. We imagine Black families sitting around, this commercial comes on, and grandma and grandpa go wild when they see Dick Gregory, and the grandchildren are saying, we're just enjoying it because it's a KD commercial. Hey, who's this old man that you're so happy? And then a dinner time conversation, and then them going and reading Dick Gregory's books and understanding his sacrifice. That was really the kind of motivational decision making that went into that. I mean, I talk about my dad because that's really literally my job now. But he wasn't out there alone, and I mean, there were so many folks who were sad. It was a generation of folks that had so much to give. Back then, very few could be an entertainer and not do something to further, some of them unintentional. I don't think O.J. Simpson woke up one day and said, I want to be an activist, but many Black folks seeing him on TV for the first time, they were activated by that. So many activists had no intentions of it. It's just the levels they've reached. And that applies to business. There's so many Black CEOs who have reached levels of just profound success. And success is a very interesting thing because what you're like, Dick Gregory as a CEO, when my dad had his Bahamian diet, his goal was not to make money.
No.
His goal was to save
Enhance
lives,
the
and
quality
he
of
wanted
life.
to make thousands of Black millionaires. And that's why he only sold it. It was available in retail, and it was available mail order, but primarily most people were selling it. It was multi-level. So there would be seminars explaining to people how to tax write-off, how to be able to have these additional revenue streams. And Armstrong Williams made his first $1 million selling Dick Gregory's
Is that
Bahamian,
right?
long before he bought
I
all his
did not
studios,
know
long
that.
before Armstrong bought all his studios and built his broadcast
I
empire.
don't even think
He
people
sold
know
Bahamian
that.
Diet. I mean, it's and so Armstrong's on the record. He has said it. There was an interview I saw where he said it in, where he said, "I made my first $1 million. The catalyst for him building his media empire was selling Dick Gregory's Bahamian Diet." So now you can imagine the board didn't feel the same way as the man who was running the company. So they said, wait a minute, Dick Gregory, my dad was a spiritual trillionaire. He was a conduit for wealth, not riches, a spiritual trillionaire. He was a conduit for wealth. It just ran through him because he explained, and if you go back and read any of his books, he always said, you know, not poor, just broke. Broke is a mindset. Poor is a reality. There's very rich people who are poor. And the difference is when you pass, is there a multi-generational, wealth is multi-generational. You can hit the lottery today and be rich. Most 85% of people who win over $1 million in the lottery go bankrupt within 4 years. So that's rich. Wealth is a mindset and it's an understanding. Most wealthy people very rarely use their own money. They understand the system. The CEO of, I'm trying to think of the parent company for WeWork. WeWork, the parent,
you're talking about the one,
the bank that bought it out,
from
that
the
saved
guy that
it.
they made a gazillionaire.
They made a gazillionaire,
and he walked away.
The new CEO just stepped down because he was demanding to be paid $2 billion a year in salary. $2 billion, and that's most folks can't even. And not only that, you're not going to pay me $2 billion, then I'll leave.
Bye-bye.
We need to know, and I'm not saying our worth is that, but whatever our worth is, we need to, because it may be more than $2 billion. We need to know our worth and be willing to stand on that, and to know that we give so much more than what we receive.
Your entire life was filled with things related to the struggle, the civil rights movement, you know, making life better for people of color. And part of that, your dad was arrested over 100 times, and you guys were arrested as a part of the movement. What was that like? How many times were you arrested for that? And what were the charges?
So, my dad, the two places he was most comfortable was in a jail cell and the airport. Those were the two places that even as he got older, he would reverse age, and on stage too, he would reverse age before your eyes. Sometimes people say, well, I don't know if Dick's going to be able to perform tonight. The moment that light hits him, something in his frontal lobe would take over, and he would become 20 years younger before your eyes. So I'm sure you've seen it. It was miraculous. And a lot of entertainers do that, as we know. But he was comfortable in prison. I guess he always had so many things that, you know, such a list of priorities of things that he needed to do. When he was in jail, as he said, hey, I was just in jail. That was the one time that he kind of felt like I'm not in control of my routine and my schedule. And he knew it was, if Dick Gregory, with all that he has to do, will go to jail for this cause, you know, what excuse do the rest of us have? Like, oh, I can't, you know, get up and go to work in the morning. Well, Dick Gregory got lost. So he led by example. And to answer your question, Nikki, thinking back, probably 7 or 8 years of age was the first time I was arrested. And it was, you would think, oh, it probably was a cute ceremonial arrestment. Like now you protest in front of the White House.
I don't think that.
It's very...
Not if you're a black person.
Not back then. And so Reedsville, Louisiana, I mean, just the deep South, it was still... And for me, the dichotomy of living in Plymouth, Massachusetts, all white friends, all white. I was one of maybe 2 black folks in my graduating class, but very grounded and very black.
And at that point in time, racism existed in northern Massachusetts, but it was different. Subtle.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's much more subtle.
Overt and covert. Yeah. So very overt down south, very covert. And the Gregorys were like rock stars in the town, in Plymouth, Massachusetts. There were other black folks there for certain, and many of them to this day are our family with us because we really bonded and connected. But to leave that and go down south for the summer, it was difficult. I mean, it was very difficult. So I remember about 8 years old. It was, and we heard about it. And me, especially me, one of the younger ones in the family, But I remember a white woman, state trooper, putting little zip ties on the front of my little 8-year-old wrist and loading all of the children, not just the Gregory children. There were other children out there too.
All black?
All black. All of the children got put on, and it was hot. It was, I mean, I'm from New England. It didn't get that hot in Boston. So it was hot. It was hot. It was humid. We sat out there in that heat on this bus, school bus, and you think I'm in a school bus in handcuffs. Just the symbolism of it all for hours.
What were you doing?
Just parading without a permit. We were walking and marching. You know, we shall overcome. Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around. This little light. All those songs are just ingrained in my brain. And my dad would always say the two strongest forces in the world: black woman, black church. And a lot of folks now, because the church has changed, didn't understand what he meant by that. So back then, if you're a black family and your house is on fire, it might have been the fire department that set your house on fire. It might have been the police department. So there was no you calling 911. You called the church. You called the black church. That was your hospital. That was your fire department. That was your police department. If you needed help or justice or assistance, you called the church. And so
the support system was the women.
That was the support system, and that was the women.
Work it out.
Because the threat of a black man back then going and asking for leniency or asking the man for help was so much more dangerous than a black woman doing it. So women were really the face of the black church, especially as they went outside of their community. And so my dad would always say, you know, us black folks really got it confused. We would, you know, we call our women strong and our truck beautiful. And so saying, we need to turn this around. That's why my Dick Gregory Media is a company my dad and I formed in 2015. It's now Tower Hill Entertainment. And our goal is to establish, we went from black pride, black strength, and all that is still marvelous, but black glamour. That's really what we're focusing on is black glamour. They show us a movie with George Washington that had wooden teeth. But in the movie, his teeth are flawless. We as black, but movies aren't documentaries. They don't have to, it's the opportunity for us to elevate and catch up for the negative images that and stereotypical images that have really set us back. So now the next wave, and at least for what my focus is really black glamour. Really show the beauty, the power, the strength in that. So there's a lot of projects, #Black Glamour. And you know, look, Bo Derek was the first white woman on TV with they've been new. Black glamour is not new. So me, it's not like there's some discovery. It's been hijacked for so long. So now it's black glamour for us, by us, and there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
Not.
So stay tuned. I got a lot of exciting non-Dick Gregory projects that are coming out.
I can't wait.
The sole focus is black glamour.
We need to do some JV stuff. I'm here for
let's do it.
I am absolutely into that. So are you a vegan?
So I don't have reflexive answers to a lot of this. So my diet is probably 90% vegan. Okay. But what I am 100% is a clean eater. So, you know.
What does that mean?
And so Whole Foods, as a general, and when I say Whole Foods, I'm not talking about the company, I'm literally Whole Foods, a food that is whole, it hasn't been a part of a full or extract of oranges and pumped back in.
Fresh
real food, not genetically modified food. And the human body needs real food. And so much of it is, you know, genetically modified. It's food that was made in a lab somewhere. And when you give the body whole food and real food, and especially as 25 years as a healthcare provider, you see the impact of that almost immediately. This pandemic that we're on, hopefully the back end of now, really showed the discrepancy between folks who looked healthy and truly were healthy. Because as a healthcare provider, some of my sickest patients on paper should have been healthy, but their physiology was far from healthy. So, you know, my wife and I, we sleep on an organic mattress. Most people have so many synthetic particles in their pillows and mattress. 7 to 8 hours a night, you're huffing this. It's like sleeping with a marker under your nose. And we don't look. We only look at what we eat. We don't look at what we put on our skin, in our
body,
minds, our ear, the thing, into our quality of our water, in our clothing.
Detergents.
Most people don't realize how toxic the things that are around them every day are. And so that was just a way of life that my dad and mom really instilled in all of us. So very long answer to your question. We're 90% vegan. We do eat occasionally eggs, cheese, and when it does, it's very clean and purposeful. I've learned a long time ago that I don't want my lifestyle to be bigger than me. So a lot of it, so I may go somewhere and I may eat something to be cordial. And as a business person, it's important.
Yeah.
Can I play golf? Yes, I can play golf. That's a lot of business. So I'm not trying. The best way you can make real change is to get in and then change. But in order to get in, you got to be able to play the game. So pun intended. And so I understood long ago the importance of being a social drinker and being able to, because so many of these places, this is where deals are made.
Yeah.
And so more than the art of the deal, it's the location of the deal. Many of your CEOs are not the smartest person in the room. They're smart
You
enough to
telling
know
me.
that and then to surround themselves with
Yeah.
smart people. And
that's actually smart.
yes, which is brilliant.
Actually smart.
Which is
And
brilliant.
I think that people think that in order to be a good leader, you have to know all the things. No, you just have to know how to make sure that all the
folks
things
that
are
have
covered.
the answers.
Exactly.
And then ultimately be able
Exactly.
to stand behind what decision the team makes.
So you said something while you were talking that led me to one of the things that I wanted to talk about. And in I don't remember the year, but when your dad was doing stand up and he played the Playboy Club when he had that delegation of white Southern businessmen. And he half was scared. Everybody was scared except your dad.
Absolutely.
And he was like, "You know what I had to go through to get it.
at
I'm
this moment,
getting on this stage.
You're not shutting this down."
And he got on stage, and I remember being so impacted by watching that. I think that's when I texted you.
Yes,
I was
you did.
crying.
You
I
did.
was sobbing, like
It's a
uncontrollably.
very, I mean, and
I said, what this man gave for us, we really still don't know.
he opened the door in a
He
meaningful way.
killed. I watched the room, and I watched how he got up there, and they were like, "Yeah," the hecklers started. And when he told his first joke, he commanded that room. And he stayed on stage for like 4 hours.
I mean,
That's unheard of.
It's as you know. I mean, again, Dick Gregory Productiions. It's not unusual for them to do a
2-hour set,
day-long set.
Yeah,
But back then, in such a carefully cultivated, and people need to realize, and there's so much talk about Playboy right now. The Playboy Mansion and the Playboy Club, two wildly different things. The Playboy Club at that time in Chicago was the largest entertainment venue, not in capacity, but in significance. If you did well there, it changed your trajectory. And when my dad arrived, and they realized that it was a Southern frozen food convention that was in town, and they had bought out the club.
Yeah.
And we frequently, Nikki, and I want to really drill down on this, we think of, oh, what did that mean for black people? Well, other than Dick Gregory, there probably was no other black people in that room. Later in life, I've really started thinking, what did that mean for these? And I'm not saying everyone down south then was a racist, but racism ruled the land back then down south and everywhere, but definitively down south. What did and sexism, because it was all men, what did those white men think seeing an intellectually superior man, shot glass in hand, cigarette, going through all of the bullet points from that morning's news? Many of them didn't even have a position on some of the things he was talking about. So after the heckling, and he knew he was going to be called nigger. He prepared for that. So he said, because once a person stops laughing, feels sorry for you, they can no longer laugh with you. They can laugh at you, but can't laugh with you. And so he was big on timing and delivering and the importance of really controlling the room. I frequently think of the impact that Playboy Club set had on the white businessmen in that audience. Here they are. They're in, and look, I don't want to, as a proud black man, I don't spend the majority of my time thinking about how things impact white folks. We live in a world that's kind of the way it's always been. But this moment particularly, because I ultimately think how it impacted them most likely went on to change how they engage with black people when they got back down south. They saw a crystal ball of the future before the Michael Jacksons, before the LeBron James, before the, even, because Dr. King, white folks despise Dr. King and everything, but so this was a crystal ball to see Dr. King's national holiday. So they got a chance to look and see and say, wait a minute. Now, not all of them would have got it, but if 10% of them got it, and I'm sure more than that, went on to change how they engaged and dealt with and understood this Black thing and what it ultimately meant. And
the way that we see it.
In the way that we see it.
In the way that we see it. My interpretation from that was I could see the looks. I like to watch the room. I'm a people watcher. And when comedians perform, I like to look at the room to see the reaction. And I looked at the way that those guys and women who were in the room looked at him. Like the first cat who's sitting there and you see him and he's looking like, what this nigga gonna say?
And you watch it. It's almost like a thaw as it goes from a scowl
went to a,
hey,
oh,
that
man.
is fun. And now, once you get someone smiling, you know this as a comedian.
And they were not just smiling, they were laughing.
Knee slapping.
They were laughing, and they were hanging on his every word.
They were in shock.
This is genius. It's genius.
They had never even heard of it because it wasn't like Dick
wasn't
Gregory
even a
was
thing.
a household name then. And
not yet.
From that,
he became
was
one.
a catalyst that in 63, 64, he was the largest not Black entertainer, largest entertainer from a financial compensation state in America, which is just crazy.
He went from $1,500 to $500,000
in a year.
In
his tax, in his income.
And that was after doing the Jack Parr show, which he took the position that he would not do it because they wouldn't let Black people sit on the couch.
It's just, this is the importance, and this is good that we have time to dig into all this because this happens to a lot of successful Black people.
Yeah.
Dick Gregory became very successful. He went from performing in Black-owned clubs in South Chicago, South Side, up to downtown. And he loved that because that's what he was worth, but he always had an allegiance to his people. And so the trouble was he would stay at the clubs in downtown, the white clubs, till like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and then go to the South Side and stay up till 5 a.m. in the morning, drinking and eating barbecue ribs. And that was another time when he started putting weight on because he was living two lives. And so he said he refused to turn his back on his people and the people who lifted him up to make him. So when he just imploded on the scene, and my dad loved Jack Parr. He was a big fan of Jack Parr. And he was sitting in a bar. And back then, I mean, Dick Gregory, Miles Davis, you would just have these folks in these Black-owned watering holes that would sit, rub shoulders and talk and just have and helping each other because they were navigating, a course that was uncharted. And so he was watching Jack Parr, and in the bar they pointed out, said, that Jack Parr is a stinking no good. But my dad was outraged. He said, what? He said, why would you? I love Jack Parr. He said, Jack Parr will let Black folks come and sing and dance, but he never lets them sit on the sofa. My dad said he went into shock because he was so caught up, to my point, in the glamour, he never connected the dots that the Black folks came and they left. And so when Jack Parr called, well, first was Jack Parr's people that he said thanks but no thanks. And then Jack Parr himself called and he said thanks but no thanks. And Jack Parr called back in and said, well, why? And he said, because you don't allow your Black guests to sit on the show. He said, well, certainly you can sit on the sofa. And so my dad later reflected that. He said, maybe Jack Parr didn't even realize. It was just so many things are just done, for the way, sexism as a man. There may be a woman that's 3 times stronger than him, but he's still holding the door for her. He's sort of like all these things, and we don't think of it. They're just ingrained because it's just how we do things. We have to question things and see them, from a bird's eye view to see what's really right or wrong. And so had he not been sitting in the bar and not been talking, that never would have been pointed out. Dick Gregory would have went and did the show and walked off, and he wouldn't have really been the catalyst for change that he ultimately went on to be. And so staying connected to his people is really what saved my dad's life. It's really what helped to chart his path. And there was just an undying bond there.
Grounded.
Absolutely, which is important.
Till the
end.
He was. It's so much. It's so much. So let me ask you this. I like to ask everybody this. When it comes to leaders, I have two questions. One is about, failure, and the other is leadership. When it comes to leaders, if you could replace all of the heads on Mount Rushmore with great leaders, CEOs, who would be your CEO Mount Rushmore?
See, for me, it's going to be folks who are all activists, and I know
Okay.
that's not your traditional
No, that's fine.
CEOs, but
I want to know who.
I would put Martin.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know there's four faces on there, correct?
Yep.
Martin, Medgar, Malcolm, and Dick Gregory.
That's it.
And I know that's sexist as all
No,
get out,
that's it.
but the reason I say that because I feel like I knew all of them so well
Mm-hmm.
because of how close I became with my dad. We laid my dad to rest with his Martin Luther King hat on. We laid him to rest with his Martin Luther King card in his pocket. I mean, it was yes, black folks grounded him and saved him, but the nonviolence of the civil rights movement is what he ultimately led to him becoming vegan, ultimately led to him changing his life
Yeah.
and all that he shared with others. So that would be that would be because it was so different. Making money's easy. If we're honest, level playing field, making money's easy. Almost, I mean, think of some of the innovative folks that read the tea leaves on this pandemic and went and spent $10,000 on hand sanitizer. The return on that if you just pay attention, because all of this, I fill in for many of the hosts on WPFW's radio programming frequently.
Okay.
And 3 months before the lockdown, I was doing deep dives on COVID-19, on what was coming, when I walk through the streets of DC now, almost without fail, someone comes up to me and says, I bought gloves, I brought sanitizer, we stocked up on toilet paper because we listened to your show. It's not like I had the CIA doesn't call and tell me what's going on. It's just paying attention.
Yeah.
So I would say making money's easy. It's almost shamefully easy for folks who are not playing on a level playing field, which you look at most families' generational wealth comes from home ownership. Well, black GIs after World War II didn't have access to the GI Bill to own homes. So when you look at that alone, that one barometer alone shows you how wildly unfair. And then to say, oh, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You never pulled yourself up by your bootstraps because your boots get pulled up. Absolutely. Boots and got to get strapped. So I would say that the sacrifice that those folks made really was unrivaled. And they all had different philosophies, different opinions, and we shouldn't all have the same philosophy. We look at folks and
I don't really think we do have the same philosophy.
Well, no, people
I think
try to.
we convince ourselves that the popular philosophy is our philosophy when in fact we don't agree, which is another thing that I believe sets leaders apart.
Yes.
Like I think outside of the box.
You have
and I'm so different from so many other people in my position, whichever position that is, at any point in life. And what you start off doing is typically not what you're going to do.
Absolutely not.
In the end.
Curveballs.
And look at you, a doctor, a filmmaker.
And I knew this. I knew and still not done. I looked at my dad metamorph so many times in his life.
Yeah.
And he always had the same cornerstones, but from breakout college athlete to, soldier in the army, drafted, not by choice, to wildly successful entertainer, to wildly successful civil rights activist, wildly successful businessman, wildly successful social critic. Every time he changed gears, it was rooted in that deep philosophy, that universal connection of love that was his driving force. And so he was never afraid to make a mistake. And as a leader, you can't, my dad would always say, fear and God can't occupy the same space. You can't be driven by fear. And Americans saw for the first time what a full fear campaign looks like during this pandemic. Whenever something becomes an industry, things get impacted and swayed in ways that quality of life and health is not. And people have to understand, medicine, we consider it practicing medicine because it's not a finite science. It's evolving regularly. So when someone says, hey, take this, this is safe, they can't
They don't
say
know.
that. And
Yeah,
so
it might be safe for you.
It might be safe
Yeah.
now. And what's the goal? The
What's the
goal
long-term
is not
impact?
how's your health going to be 20 years from now. It's we need to get through this pandemic. That's the goal, because we're all afraid. So I learned so much as a as a human being, as a healthcare provider. And so, folks went years ago when the Matrix came out. Oh, red or blue pill. Oh, I know what pill I'm taking. I'm about. My dad and I were never. We were always. We understood the do. We would go in March, and then maybe go get a massage at the Four Seasons after. It was like we didn't always have to be fist up. It's that yin and yang, that balance in life. And yin and yang are not. They're endpoints. Life is a combination of the two, and you move back and forth on that spectrum to adjust for what you need at that time. Rigid, entrenched positions kills people. And so whether it's politics, whether it's healthcare, that's why people say, well, what's your diet? It's influx, because I'm always reading, I'm always learning, I'm always desiring to have a better understanding. LE, which is called life extension. That science now, you see so many of your corporate CEOs that, they damn near look like they're bodybuilders now because they're so lean and so fit. Most of them are doing life extension, breakthrough technologies, whether it's with low dose testosterone pellets and whether it's with, human growth hormone, all of these things. You look at Jeff Bezos, and the guy looks 10 times fitter than he was when he was 20 years younger. I'm not anti-technology. You have to balance these two things out. And so what I focus on these days is what I call QLE, quality life extension. Don't just extend my life without extending my quality of life. So I work out now for the person I want to be 20 years from now, not what I'm trying to look like now. Too many folks are in the gym working out, doing the same workout they did when they were in college, trying to look like they were. You're not in college anymore. So we have, and they all would wind up
So
hurt
what
in
does
my
that
office.
mean? Unpack that. You work out now for the person you want to be 20 years from now. What does that mean?
Look at the ailments impacting folks in our family or friends that are old. Hip replacements, knee replacements. So I don't go out hooping anymore.
Okay.
I don't go, I'm not trying to squat 350 pounds anymore. So, a matter of fact, I learned this from Cicely Tyson. Cicely Tyson did 100 sit-ups every day, 100 push-ups every day, homogenized throughout the day. Since this pandemic, my wife and I, every day, 125 push-ups in the morning, midday another 25, 25 later, and 25 right before bedtime. Push-up, sit-up. Just homogenize it, micro exercising. Most of us, as mammals, I frequently say we're the most confused mammals on the planet. We sit all day long like we're slugs. Then we go to bed at night, we build these big soft nests like we're birds, and then we wonder why our neck and back hurt because we're not being 602 muscles, 202 bones. We're designed to move. And so the healthiest folks I know who have got hip replacements because they 8 hours sleeping, whatever, somewhere around there. Most people, 9 to 10 hours working, then they go and get an hour-long crazy workout in. That's like not drinking a sip of water except for 30 minutes drinking a gallon. That's not healthy. And most of us don't understand because we're doing I got my workout in. Well, 2 hours after you stop drinking that water, you're dehydrated again. We're not camels. The body doesn't store water. So I've applied that philosophy. So I swim more. Yoga, Pilates. You look at folks, what they call blue zones, where people live, not just live, because medicine's gotten to a point. I've been to some folks' home where grandma's upstairs. Grandma hasn't come out of that room in 20 years. She hasn't said anything. Basically, they're sustaining vital signs just so they don't have to mourn the loss of her. But she's been gone for some time. Science has gotten good. We can maintain vital signs. But and you look in our community, diabetes, folks missing legs, missing limbs, the amount of scooters going up and down the street. They're slowly dying, and the alarm bell doesn't go off to say, you have to change what you're doing. We just accept it. Oh, of course, I knew I was going to get it. My mom and my dad would say, people will say, oh, diabetes runs in my family. No. Bad living runs in your family.
So, and I only have like 2 more questions. In business, in business, failure is oftentimes indelibly etched into the landscape, as you know, for leaders. Failure typically happens. You can't be afraid to fail and be successful. So has there been a time for you when you have failed and learned from that failure?
How much time you got? If you don't plan to fail, if that's not in your calibration, you're not cut out for this. I mean, in America, we build things to sell them. So anyone that's going in, oh, we're building this business, we're going to keep it in the family. I'm like, okay, so that's a mom and pop business going. If you're planning to scale, me and you may start making, our own delicious brownies, and we may be able to handle it up to level it's $1 million business. People who can do $1 million business aren't cut out for $100 million business. If you don't scale and bring the right folks, and that's what ultimately happened to my dad's company. He didn't scale, but he knew. He said, I'm not scaling because my goal is not money. My goal is keeping black folks wealthy. And if I sell this Beech Nut, which was a company at the time, well, still today, $32 million deal that they wanted to buy the Bahamian diet for. He never got that money. In the documentary, the way it's edited, it seems like, oh, he got the money and lost it. He walked away from more money than what most people make in 10 lifetimes because he said, if I sell it to you, you're going to axe the arm that is the multi-level arm. It was going to only be available retail. And so that's the reason he walked away from it than infighting within the group. So if you don't plan to fail, you are the lessons. So I have an undergraduate degree from Morgan State in business administration. After I got that degree, I could not read the New York Times any better than that's not what degrees show. You have the capacity to learn, by the time it's taught in school, it's outdated. And so I'm a former math teacher. I taught math for Baltimore City Public Schools. I would tell kids, all my students all the time, oh, you're not always going to have a calculator. What? Now we got Siri, they don't even need to do mathematic equations anymore. They just ask their digital assistant to give them the answers. So if you don't see what things are going to become and you try to say most laws, the only law of the universe is change. Change is the only thing that's guaranteed to happen, evolution and change. And so the same applies to business. And if you're not flexible as a leader, I saw, one of the most challenging things with managing my dad's estate was just the familial tension with my siblings because we all kind of do things different. And so, it's not that someone's right or someone's wrong. It's just that I knew it was an incredible, heavy and difficult and emotional lift. I knew that my dad had asked me to do it, not just literally, but contractually in his will. And so I just, I circled the forces and just dug in and got it done. Looking back at it, there was plenty of failure. Could I have looped more folks in? But I mean, when it's a blitzkrieg coming at you, you don't have the luxury of hindsight. I can go back and fix many of these things in hindsight. Most of it is misunderstandings, and it's, of the mind, not of the heart. And so we're a massive, loving family. Could I have done better? Absolutely. But that wasn't my first goal at that time. Now that I've insulated that, the goal can change and shift. And that is it. The end zone, unlike sports, the end zone constantly moves. And so if you're not prepared, wait, as I'm running towards the end zone, we went from playing football to soccer to basketball. That's life. And so how many businesses didn't see this curveball of the pandemic? You have Peloton, who boomed. Now that was a failure of leadership. Of course, at some point, folks are going back to the gym. Folks are going back to being fit, but socially. And if you didn't see that coming, and most of them did, they just wanted to extract maximum return on investment and then let the stockholders take a bath, and they fall where they may. But yes, you have to, and I have failed more times than I've succeeded. And I like that. I love that. The things that have made me, have been character builders, have been my failures, not my successes. Because by the time you get a success, you're on to the next. Failures weigh on you, and it sticks. And it's like, no. I remember what happened. I don't always remember everything I did to succeed. I remember every time there was a failure for certain.
What frightens you?
The very few things in life, and this isn't bravado, very few things frighten me in life. Death has never frightened me. Sickness and disease has never frightened me. Pain has never frightened me. What frightens me is truly the poor and marginalized. That we as a society, middle class, looking at just at America for a moment, middle class is wiped out. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. It's not coming back. And it's not because black and brown people are coming across the border and taking your jobs. It's innovation, artificial intelligence, trucks that drive. I'm in a car now that can drive back and forth to New York, and frequently I do it with me almost never touching the steering wheel. We're here. This isn't pie in the sky. This isn't down the road. So now you have truck drivers. We already saw what Uber and Lyft did to traditional taxi cabs. A very good friend of the family owned payphones in, I think, 80% of the airports in America. A black man owned the pay. Well, if you didn't see that pivot, when's the last time you used a payphone?
No.
And so,
when's the last time you seen a
payphone other than in a museum?
Yeah.
So what I'm really, and it doesn't keep me awake at night, but in my deep thought and reflection is society is not ready for the shift that is upon us. And it scares me a little bit. It frightens me a little bit.
The shift.
As we're seeing upticks in school shootings, we're seeing upticks in, just watch the news. You see all of the, and this isn't just folks responding to the pandemic, it's this shift. And there's 3 or 4 lengthy projects in Europe where they were giving what they call universal income, giving people money not to work. You couldn't invest the money, you had to spend it to see how people are going to handle. We were hunters and gatherers. So to see how people say, hey, you don't need to do anything anymore, the government's just going to take care of you, because it's not that you don't want to work, there are no jobs. And so there's a real interesting shift. People will be and I'm deep in the metaverse space. I'm deep in the NFT space. I'm on
I just came on.
I'm an advisor on for 6 years now. I've been on the advisory board for 2 NFT companies.
Really?
And this is something that we have been planning for. And those who are in the intellectual property space, what an NFT is, and the disservice now, it's the rappers, it's this and that. They're almost belittling what it is. It's protecting your intellectual property. And intellectual property, my dad had more intellectual property than he did physical property.
Yes, he did.
So intellectual property, copyright does a very poor job of protecting your intellectual property. A non-fungible token, 10 generations after we're gone, will still keep that NFT, will still keep that ownership connected to you and your family and your legacy. That generational wealth that NFTs, by definition, lock in, is like nothing we've ever seen. So I'm not the first. Now people are getting into the something apes that they're buying, but the original was
Bored apes.
The original was CryptoKitties. That was 4 or 5 years ago, and folks were, these celebrities would draw a kitten. Folks were trading art. Art has value because we assign it value. In NFTs, it's the same thing. But more than anything, just like if you have property, you have a deed for, each person owns property, has a deed for that property. NFTs are a deed for your intellectual property. And it is recognized all over the world because it is not an American thing. So
I just dug in. Can you help me?
Oh, absolutely.
I minted my first NFT, and it's actually my caricature, my anime that I had created when I first started doing comedy.
That you've made into an NFT.
I made it into an NFT.
So here's the thing. Everything you own intellectual property-wise, you need to turn into an NFT.
Yeah. Okay.
It may, depending on how much it is, maybe a couple hundred, a couple thousand, it'll be the best money you ever spent, because moving forward, look at all the people that steal stuff. I'm talking about songs, music, films, the bootleg industry. This prevents all of that.
Okay.
And it's fine for people to have copies. Look at the Mona Lisa.
Yeah.
Everyone.
That's right.
Your copy ain't worth nothing, because
That's right.
we know where we can verify where the real one is. And so an NFT is a verification system that says anyone in the world can run that NFT and say, oh, that is owned by Nikki Moore.
Yeah.
That is owned by Chris. And that's a beautiful thing.
It is.
And it's important. And a lot of times we're too late. Our community's too late to get into these things. So metaverses, so in the future,
that's the wave.
Most folks won't be working. And so most folks won't be working, so they will spend all of their time. An old black man can be a young Chinese woman. You can be whatever you want to be. So it is going to be as wild as some of these films depicted.
I'm so excited.
It is an interesting time.
I need you to help me, honestly. I want to learn everything that I can.
We're family.
So let me
consider
just
that
say
done.
this. We're going to begin to wrap. This has been amazing. I told you I could talk to you all day. Like, it's so much information. And for me, I'm like a sponge when I hear
Take
this
it in.
because
Take
I
it
get
in.
so inspired. So I just wanted to say, like, honestly, what your family has contributed to the American landscape is just, it's akin to life water for me. It's like I really want to thank you, and I want to thank the entire Gregory family, starting with your dad, and I've told him this, and for just like digging the well, the
Absolutely.
proverbial well that Black Americans and marginalized people for generations to come will drink from. It's like we got clean water because of you. We can sit here and have this conversation in a studio owned by an amazing Black videographer
Absolutely.
and filmmaker, and just we can share our the wealth that is the knowledge of these things. Thank you so much for keeping this legacy alive. Thank you for making the 25-year-olds know the impact that Dick Gregory made on this landscape for them.
Absolutely.
For them. Your dad
Absolutely.
loved young people too. And I've seen young people just sit around him and be like, in awe because of his raw candor. He was unapologetically who he is, and that's so liberating. That's beyond humility.
Oh, absolutely.
It's empowering.
And
It's
I'm sitting here
empowering.
just soaking in every word of what you're saying
As you
because
should.
I was uplifted by when I would watch young folks engage with my
Yeah.
dad. I mean, he just really
Yeah.
was a unique, comedian aside, civil rights, just as a human being, just being so interested in life and being kind and lovable. It just was as he got older, he got prickly as he had his ailments and he was dealing with things as we all, if we're going, but it was a case study in love, in intellect, in fairness, and in someone that just, never stopped sacrificing.
No.
And so when I hear young folks, I hear this conversation we're having, every opportunity.
What
Us
you trying to say?
Gregorys
I'm not
receive
young,
so
Crystal?
much. No,
Trying to say I'm not young, Doc?
You're,
No, I'm
you're,
just kidding.
you're as young. We're all as
I'm
young.
kidding.
Biological age and physiological age are two
different
entirely
things,
different
yes.
animals. There's two teenagers sitting
Yeah.
right here exchanging with old folk wisdom, but two teenagers right here engaging. And it is
It's amazing.
the process, the journey has been so rewarding.
Yes.
I mean, it's like a lottery ticket that keeps hitting. Same number. I haven't changed the number once. It just keeps hitting, and each different iteration of it is so special and magical in its own way. The future is so incredibly bright. Fearing God, do not occupy the same space. We're going to get information out to the masses, continue it. The legacy of work goes on. Joe Morton's one-man play, Turn Me Loose, based on my dad's life story.
I
We're
remember
this
when that
close
came
from it going
on
on,
Broadway.
going to Broadway again.
Good.
And so there's so many good things. The
Yeah.
biopic is coming
Yeah.
out. It's just there's talks right now to turn the cross-country run when my dad ran from Los Angeles, California to New York City to bring attention to food insecurity globally.
And he ran from Chicago to D.C.,
And
right?
that was the first one.
Yeah.
So the Chicago to
Yeah.
D.C. run was to bring attention to domestic
Yeah.
hunger. The L.A. to New York run was to bring attention to global hunger. And so we're in talks to turn that into a documentary.
Good.
Folks
And
don't
doing
read
that,
as much.
he made a super significant point when, people were asking the questions. I saw one of the press conferences, and I studied him before I first interviewed him. And he said, like, I think the reporter said something like, "Are you under a doctor's care?" This was when he was doing the fast. He said, "No. People that snort coke don't check with their doctor. People smoke cigarettes don't check
Which
with
is
their
a great
doctor."
line.
And he had the ability to make things so
like that,
plain.
just make it clear. Make it clear.
So plain.
As he would say, his doctor been dead, and so he said, if you check, he said, "Man, my doctor's been dead." And so he had a story, and I know he had a story where he said he was in New York City, and he was in Central Park, and a brother walked up to him. He said, "Hey, dude," he said, "Hey, brother," and he said he offered him an apple. He said the brother had cocaine dust on his nose. heroin needle in his hand. And he said, but Brother Dick, is it organic? And so sometimes we can prioritize wrong, and we get too caught up in the what's trending instead of using our common sense. And he was a thinker.
He
was a thinker.
Constant.
Logic was applied. He didn't care what you read, what you thought you knew.
And he would convince us to become thinkers.
Absolutely.
And read.
That's
he
the
said,
only
do
way.
your research.
He said, if you ever want to hide something.
He used to say, punch it up. Punch it
up. And he'd have
punch
you,
it up.
because he could have told you, but because he'd
said,
always say,
up.
most of y'all don't believe it until white folks tell you anyway.
Yeah.
So look it up.
Yeah.
And he'd say, if you want to hide something from an ignorant person, put it
right
in a
in
book.
front of him.
No, and he would say, put it in a book, because ignorant folks don't read. So we got a big job to do. We got an important job. And as my dad would say, have fun quick, because recess is just about over.
Let's go. Let's go. Dr. Christian Claxton Gregory.
Thank you, Doc,
so much.
Continued success
I don't think
you
that this
in this
been,
program.
No, I meant to ask you, what do you do for fun?
This. Right now, right now.
Is fun,
This isn't work. I mean, I've never, as my dad would always say, Queen Elizabeth don't work. I've never worked other than when I taught high school math. My practice was my practice, everything. I've never worked, I've never punched in. And by doing that, you work harder, as you know.
I'm never doing it again.
And so work's not work.
Never doing it again.
If you're not willing to do it for free, you're detracting from your quality of life. So this is blissful.
And
for
when
me.
you love what you do, it's
absolutely,
not work.
absolutely.
Not
So
work.
no, this is we could go we could outlast these digital
we
cameras.
Could. Darling,
Thank
you
you
put
so
us
much.
out of here. I love you.
Love and appreciate you.